Wayne's going to eat that whole deer, and the next one's yours.
It's time to return to the world of Sony Pictures Animation and its colorful cast of villains, from old-school vampires to genocidal wizards to even Jack Black. Hey guys, I'm Brad with Wicked Bench, and this is sentencing Sony Pictures animation villains for their crimes. But before we get to them, how about we check in on our old buddy Shaw? In our last sentencing video, we sentenced this sleazy poacher to a lofty 15 years for his habits of poaching, reckless driving, and animal cruelty. But in open season, Scared Silly, he's back in action and emerges as a changed man who just wants to enjoy his newfound life as a tour guide. Nah, I'm just kidding. Some people never change, and while we did find out that Shaw has some incredible artistic skills, he's also incredibly skilled at manipulating Timberline into reopening open season after fears of a werewolf rumor coming up.
Open season is back on, baby cakes!
To his credit, Shaw did think there was legitimately a werewolf thanks to Ian's incredible performance, but that doesn't change the fact that he used this opportunity to continue his illegal hunting habits. In fact, that seems to be his main goal. Despite the sheriff warning him to not touch anything or anyone aside from the werewolf, Shaw disguises himself as a werewolf to scare Elliot and Boog with the intent to kill them for revenge. At the end of the movie, he's thankfully caught by the police and, in the sheriff's own words, charged with impersonating a monster and causing a panic. Shaw plus Freedom is not a good mix. As we saw here, he was surprisingly sharp with using his incredible instincts to murder two animals who are only really guilty of defending themselves. Add a rifle into the mix and you've got a recipe for disaster. This time around, Shaw gets 30 years in prison and having his gun Lorraine revoked. Okay, maybe she can visit once every couple of weeks or so. We aren't that cruel. And while Shaw is the mastermind of the film's conflict, he's not all alone. Ed and Edna are culpable as well. They're really just guilty of helping Shaw with his plans. Now, this does imply that they're also more than likely guilty of some of Shaw's past crimes, like animal cruelty and poaching. But while Shaw never really let go of his past sins, Ed and Edna seem to have found an honest living as the proprietors of a poutine shack on the side of a road. On top of this, they seem incredibly stupid, like in the nicest way possible. They seem like they probably look up and down to cross the street. This is noteworthy, simply because it calls into question how much they actually understood regarding the illegality of their actions. While Shaw is a malicious repeat offender, Ed and Edna seemed content running their poutine business. Call me a softie, but I say we let them off with 5 years of parole. Those three were wild, but at least they didn't have magical powers like Gargamel. Gargamel is a villainous sorcerer that returns in the Smurfs 2, and while his crimes in the first movie were already more than enough to earn him the death penalty, fret not, he still gets worse. He's still on his genocide, attempted world domination, kidnapping, torture, animal abuse, assault, etc. arc. But the sequel adds a lovely dose of playing God into the mix. Yeah, Gargamel basically pulled a Frankenstein and created his own evil Smurfs called Naughties. One of these was Smurfette, who was turned into a true blue Smurf by Pop and the gang when Gargamel sent her in as a spy. He psychologically abuses his other Naughties, who are by definition his children, and plans to throw them in with the regular Smurfs to harvest for energy and take over the world. So, since Gargamel's crimes got worse, we have to somehow make his sentence worse than the death penalty. And we've got the ticket. Gargamel is a very powerful magician who actually came pretty close to taking over the entire world. So, instead of destroying him, we've got something he'll hate even more. We sentence Gargamel to using his magic for good for the rest of his days, complete with permanent headphones that play the happy song on loop whenever he strays. Weirdly enough, I don't think this is overboard. Next is Chester V from Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 2, a man who raises many questions such as, can your ideas change the world? Can your ideas change the world? And most importantly, can your ideas change the world? But we have no time to ponder such abstract philosophical concepts today. Instead, we're just gonna ponder how absolutely vile this man is. Seriously, Gargamel is almost undeniably the nastiest guy we've talked about so far, but Chester is a pretty close second. His goal is to force a shutdown of Flint's Flizzermdifer, or however you spell it, to save Swallow Falls from being overrun by living, breathing food organisms.
They're trying to learn to swim.
Or so you'd have you think. Instead, his goal was to trick Flint into shutting it down, using his admiration for Chester as his childhood hero to get the machine for himself. This constitutes grand theft and psychological manipulation. But he doesn't stop there. Considering his psychological abuse of his employees, especially Barb, the man is borderline sadistic. His goal is to use the actual benign food creatures as fuel for his new Food Bar 8.0 product. There's literally no reason he couldn't just use regular food, so he's deliberately going out of his way to make his bars out of murdered innocent animals. That's attempted genocide of multiple species for the purpose of solely making money. Considering how remorseless he is and how much of a danger he poses to society, Chester V is sentenced to life in prison alongside the immediate repossession of all his assets. Your ideas really did change the world, man, just not in a good way. Now we have to mention his right-hand ape, Barb. Unlike Steve, Barb lacks a healthy camaraderie with her human bestie. In fact, Chester doesn't deserve the term bestie. The guy couldn't even be bothered to call her an ape instead of a monkey.
Never send a monkey to do Chester work.
While Barb is complicit in many of Chester's crimes, most of them can be chalked up to manipulation rather than any malicious intent of her own. When Flint and company accept her into their group, she seems genuinely happy and ready to live a better life. So we'll sentence Barb to 1 year of parole, just to make absolute sure she isn't a danger to anyone on her own. And since Earl's a part of the gang, we've already got a parole officer. How convenient. Now we have Count Dracula. Okay, he's not a full-on villain. He loves his family and friends, runs a pretty nice hotel, has some sick dance moves. He's a decent guy. But in Hotel Transylvania 2, he actually has a surprisingly dark list of crimes. Let's see, there's extortion, reckless driving, which at one point caused Blobby to fall out of the car, and the return of good old psychological manipulation to get Mavis and Johnny out of the picture. Not like killed out of the picture, just on a nice vacation out of the picture. That's not so bad, right? Well, what is bad is that he did this to essentially kidnap his grandson Dennis, determined to help him grow his fangs, even with no proof that he's a vampire yet. At one point, he drops Dennis off of a giant tower, and although he does save him at the last moment, this still constitutes a huge charge of child endangerment, not to mention the destruction of Dana's camp.
You're lucky we don't call the authorities.
To Drax's credit, none of this was malicious. He just wanted to bond with his grandson and find any way he can keep his family in the hotel. But while we feel for him, there is a lot of issue we have to take with the crimes he committed. I'm gonna sentence Drax to 3 years of community service. You're a good guy, Drax, but we can't have you throwing toddlers off of rickety diving boards. The apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, but when it comes to Vlad Dracula, the tree is a little worse. When Drax's father comes to town, he's revealed to be an old-fashioned monster purist. In an effort to bring out Dennis's fangs, he possesses a performer at his birthday party posing as his favorite monster, Cakey the Cake Monster. Not only is this possessing a living being against their will, but it also constitutes assault for how much he absolutely disfigures his body, and conspiracy to traumatize his grandchild. Top it off with some family racism and you got a recipe for a pretty unsympathetic case.
You let your daughter marry a human?
But he does actually show some redemption when Dennis goes missing. He saved Johnny's life from Bella, his former underling, and forbid him to ever come near his family again, demonstrating a clear change of heart. So while this might be controversial, since in terms of morality as a whole, Vlad is certainly a worse person than his son, we're going to pardon the big guy. Plus, he did pass on his sick dance moves to the next generation, right? That's worth something, surely. For our last movie of the day, we have to take a look at the more unfriendly side of monster kind. Next up are R.L. Stine's monsters from Goosebumps. Led by a dummy.
Who are you calling dummy? Dummy?
Sorry, very handsome wooden statue named Slappy, these monsters are figments of Goosebumps author R.L. Stine's imagination. Unfortunately for the world at large, they couldn't just stay there, coming into the real world and causing commotion to say the least. Just looking at Slappy, he has a penchant for mass terrorism, taking great pleasure in sowing chaos wherever he goes. On top of that, he's a reckless driver too. Have you no shame? As for the other monsters, they're pretty much mindless zombies, heck bent on causing as much destruction as they can. There's no way around it, these guys are objectively the stuff of nightmares, meaning they must be met with the death penalty. Oh, but they aren't the last monsters we talk about. The grand finale is a man who sends shivers down the spine of his audience, Jack Black, but you know him better as R.L. Stine. I'll acknowledge right away that Stine didn't mean for his creations to come to life and start destroying humanity, and he did also ultimately aid in defeating them, even willing to sacrifice himself if necessary. But there is the mass destruction of property he inadvertently caused. Further still, there's his creation of his daughter Hannah, which is at best playing God out of loneliness and at worst a legitimate crime against humanity. Imagine being permanently 16, watching everyone around you slowly wither away as you yourself can only observe from a distance, or maybe don't. That's kinda scary. Still, Mr. Stein never meant any harm, and while you could argue the mass destruction was his fault to an extent, it wasn't fully in his control. It would be cruel to punish him more than necessary, so we'll give him a lifetime of community service, and for the love of God, burn that typewriter.